All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Scrum at Scale webinar presentation. My name is Alyssa Layden, and I'm the product owner of marketing for Scrum at Scale LLC. Before introducing today's speaker, I would like to cover just a few housekeeping items. First, to provide you with the best listening experience, all audio lines except for the host and the presenter will be muted during the webinar. If you would like to ask the presenter a question for the Q&A section or comment, please use the chat function. And finally, this presentation is being recorded and will be available to play on demand from both the Scrum at Scale website and the Scrum at Scale YouTube channel within 24 hours. All right, and we are now ready to start today's presentation. And for that, I would like to introduce our host, Ernesto. Ernesto is a certified Scrum at Scale trainer and an Agile transformation leader. Ernesto will lead a 30-minute presentation and then host a 15-minute Q&A session. All right, take it away, Ernesto.
Thank you for that, Alyssa, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to be sharing here in a quick second, and hopefully everyone can see what I see, which is a welcoming screen. Today we're going to talk about how do we scale the product owner in a distributed environment. But before we do that, and as we give time for folks to join, I just want to take a quick feel for where folks are joining us from. So in your chat window, you have the ability to type in free form. If you could just type in where you're joining us from today. And we can get, we have Chicago, Tampa, Baltimore, the UK. Oh, welcome. Athens, Maryland, San Antonio, Atlanta. Wow, pretty spread out. Poland. That's pretty neat. Excellent. Please keep typing if you haven't put in your local area. Excellent. Thank you. While we do that also, I wanted to get a quick feel for how are you working today. And in order to do that, we're going to go to a quick poll that Alyssa is going to help us with. And wanted to understand what are your levels of experience with Agile? So how many years of experience do you have working with Agile? That could range between no experience with 0 to 1. That's okay. This is a safe place. You're in the right place as well. Or you have more than 15 years and you could be here sitting next to me co-delivering this training today. So if you will, just select the one that is most appropriate to you. And also, let us know if you're working in a distributed environment. If you are, just click on true there. That means that your teams are located anywhere, whether that is in a different building or in a different location around the world. Or you might be fully co-located and then the answer would be false. Or perhaps you're not in a role today and you're here to explore some of that. So in that case, it's not applicable. All right. How are those answers coming in, Alyssa?
They are, I think, pretty well all in. We had about a minute to answer, so I will end the poll and share the results. Is everyone able to see?
Yes, I got it on my side, and I'm going to put it right here in front so everyone that may not be seeing it in their screen gets a second view of it. And that has the winner as far as the amount of experience between 1 to 5 years. That's very common. That's normally the type of folks that are interested in more information about how to scale some of the aspects of their work environment. We have some folks between 5 to 10 also, quite a bit, 30%. And then on the distributed team, about 67% of you are working in a distributed environment today. Wow, that's a lot. And that's a little higher than we're used to seeing, and we're seeing that number continuing to climb. It is always a high number. It is for certain always exceeding the folks that are co-located now. But what we're seeing that is interesting is that we're seeing more and more folks in that bracket of working in a distributed environment. So it's become the new norm. It's the standard of how we're working today. And as we explore that, we want to provide you with content on how you might be able to scale the product owner in that environment. How are you able to provide the proper amount of representation for your product owner and for your product backlog, and we're going to go into those in a distributed environment. Okay. Alyssa, thank you for the introduction. This is a quick slide about myself. And more importantly, the company that I represent is Agile Genesis. We provide training, and that includes training online as well as training within physical cities. You could go to agilegenesis.com and see a schedule. We're also providing a discount code for those of you that attended today, for thanking you for attending today. So you may punch that in if you're registering for a class. And also, if you're interested in an ongoing community of Agile practitioners and learners, we have our meetup, which is effective online as well. So you can just go to meetup.com and find us on Agile Online. Okay. Enough for that. Let's get into the content. For many of you, you might already be familiar with Scrum at Scale, but for others, it might be a new framework to you, a new concept to you. Scrum at Scale is the ability for us to be able to take more than one team and have them coordinate between each other into a matter that can scale linearly across the organization. What does that mean? Well, it means it's not hierarchical. It means it can grow organically in a way that allows for the teams to continue to self-organize and provides a structure for those teams to be able to do so. And it is as close as we can get it to how you're practicing Scrum today at the team level as well. So it is truly a fractal implementation of that which you are doing at the team level, but at the organizational level, providing organizational agility, or Scrum at the organization and enterprise level. Okay, and in order for us to do that, the framework divides the what and the how. So we take the product owner cycle, which is providing the what we're building, the requirements, the vision, the prioritization, owning the backlog, and owning the release planning. And then we have the circle that is the Scrum Master circle that provides the how we're building this, the continuous improvement that is necessary for that productivity to increase, the actual development of the work. This is where the work is getting done. And all of along the way, we have an executive action team at the center that is providing and facilitating what needs to happen on both sides. On the product owner side, we have the executive meta Scrum. So today we're going to cover a little more about the executive meta Scrum. If you have any questions and want to explore the framework further than what we're going to be discussing here today, the Scrum at Scale .com website has the Scrum at Scale guide. It is the guiding document that contains all of the material that we're going to be discovering and goes on and talking about today, and goes beyond that into describing the full framework. Okay. So we're going to talk about the Meta Scrum, as I mentioned. That is the what portion of the framework. The Meta Scrum is the product owner circle. It is a gathering of the key stakeholders, the leadership, the product owners, and team members as well, where the discussions are centered around those requirements and their level of prioritization and refinement and planning for deploying. It is run by something that might be new to you if you're practicing Scrum at the team level, is the chief product owner. The chief product owner is the individual that facilitates and coordinates the Meta Scrum as far as the discussions that are carried out and the intent of that meeting and that group of individuals. The Meta Scrum is expected to meet at least once per sprint, but we actually recommend that it happens more than that. Right? It is meant to align the entire enterprise to a single backlog. This is the glue that brings those backlog decompositions that are going to happen at the team level into a single product backlog that the organization follows. And in this case, it looks at what elements may have changed and how we could pivot the strategy in order to prioritize what might be more important after we discuss it and explore it. Okay? It is also a place where blocks are removed, where we actually take impediments and talk about removing some of those items from that which would allow us to deliver the proper product at the right time. Okay? So in scaling the product owner, we have some new constructs. We have the product owner, which you might be familiar with. The product owner at the team level owns the team product backlog for the product that they are building. It works by having the teams work in a single sprint. Today, most sprints are 2 week long. About 62% of the industry is following 2 week sprints, but it can go up to no more than a 30-day period or a month period as far as one cycle, right? And the chief product owner, that's the CPO here, is that individual that works with other product owners at the team level. So what you're seeing here is actually this team being represented by one of these pentagrams here with a product owner in it. So what you have is the chief product owner working and coordinating with the individual product owners. The chief product owner owns the product backlog. Multiple teams are coordinated through the chief product owner at the what level. They're in charge of the roadmap, of coordinating teams, and of course, optimizing value for the product, optimizing value delivery. The chief product owner is responsible for optimizing value delivery. And then at the third construct here, we have the executive Scrum team. The executive Scrum team is the chief product owner. It's one layer on top of this, which allows us to create that linear scaling that I talked about at the beginning. It allows us to add as many of these particular groupings here, which are our CPO teams, as many as we need in order for that to grow in a manner that is including at the center the executive meta scrum. That has the chief product owner running the executive meta scrum, and they talk about value stream, the vision of the product, and the overall organizational priorities. Right? So on with that information, I'll move over to the next slide, but let's take that off the screen for a second, and Alyssa's going to help us with another quick survey here, or another quick poll. We're going to poll when you're ready, Elizabeth. Yeah? Okay.
Yep, there we go.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
So if you could tell us, what is your role in Scrum today? Are you acting as a Scrum Master? Are you acting as a product owner? Regardless of the level of scaling, are you a developer? Or perhaps you're involved at the strategic level as a manager or as an executive. And secondly, in Scrum, let's test your knowledge based on what we covered so far. Who owns the product backlog? Does the Scrum Master own it? Does the product owner? The stakeholders? Or does the full team?
While everyone is voting, Ernesto, we got a quick comment just about some crackling in the audio.
Oh.
I don't know if it's the microphone or what. It's only happened a couple of times.
Okay, let me adjust my microphone here. And hopefully that's better.
Perfect.
Let me know if it's not. I have another microphone I can try. Okay.
Yep, we got a couple of comments. We're good.
All right. Thank you for that
Awesome.
feedback.
Of course.
Okay, we're just giving time for folks to fill in. If you haven't yet, just click on the item that's most appropriate to you, and tell us who do you think owns the product backlog in this case? That click has to travel far. In some cases, it has to travel from the UK.
Perfect. All right, so it's been about 2 minutes, so I'll end the poll. Perfect.
And we see the answers. Thank you, Alyssa.
Excellent.
All right. So many Scrum Masters on the call, followed by quite a bit of product owners. Thank you for attending, folks. We have developers as well who are interested in learning more about their peer roles, and we have managers and executives, and then some folks that are exploring. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. And then as far as testing your knowledge, of course, most of the team got it right. We've got the product owner as the owner of the product backlog, right? I could see how many of you might have answered the full team. That is something that the team works from. So the product owner, through the product backlog, provides the scope of the work for the development team to work on. It is the focus and the only source of work for the development team and for the full team to focus on. But the product owner is the person responsible and accountable for the product backlog. Okay. Thank you for indulging me in that. Moving on to why the product owner is such a critical role. The product owner is the person who is always available to clarify answers regarding requirements and the product itself. The product backlog items need oftentimes clear descriptions, and questions will come up by the development team. The time to provide answer to those questions is critical. Research has shown that decision latency can impact significantly the performance of the team. By as much as decisions that are made difference between 1 hour to 5 hours, you could have as much as a 58% success rate in some projects when decisions are made quickly, compared to an 18% success rate when some decisions take longer, perhaps as much as 5 hours, right? And this is, in my opinion, actually a very close gap. Normally what I see is that a product owner could potentially take days to provide an answer in a distributed team, right? If I have to wait for the 12-hour cycle to complete so that I can get a question answered by my product owner, and that person might not have the answer immediately, then we're going to the second day, and we're talking about days, not hours, when we're dealing with distribution. So it's significantly impactful, which is why one of the key elements of doing what we do in a scalable manner as far as distributed teams is to have those product owners and those chief product owners and those chief product owners organized in a way that they are local to their respective teams. So you would have a product owner that is local, at least from a time zone perspective. We're going to talk a little bit about that at the team level. And then the chief product owner could be more regional. And then the chief product owner is organizational wide, right? This slide also shows how we scale the product backlog items in a way that we start with very large epics that get broken down into individual product backlog items at the chief product backlog level. And then we end up decomposing those into their individual team product backlog items. Okay. So the cross-team communication happens in a way that takes a product backlog item, and by it starting at the highest epic level with the value stream being the highest visibility into that epic, the chief product owner is able to take that item and decompose it at a very high level that is still an epic to be delivered by the CPO. So it goes from the chief product owner to the chief PO, And that is coordinated across the different POs that are relevant to that epic. And that epic flows from that CPO down to the individual product owner that might be working on it. And by doing that, the teams coordinate among their POs, and sometimes the completion of the story enters in through one team and comes out through the other team, through the coordination that happens in this network here. Okay. When it comes to the estimates across the teams, we're often asked, well, how do you scale the estimates? How do you scale points? And the key takeaway here is that it's perfectly fine to take our points and aggregate them from the point of the individual team estimates. And within the points that make up that epic, we have our big epic points aggregated or added together. And combining those big epics into the chief product owner epic, we could arrive at an estimated point based on simply the addition of the individual teams, the chief product owner, and the chief product owner network. Yep. Velocity works the same way. And this might be a surprise to some of you, right? Because we traditionally talk about the fact that the velocity and the points are specific to each team, and that still remains true. The key element here is that we can aggregate the velocity of the teams all the way up to the chief product owner, and it's still true to what the overall epic velocity is. So if you take the velocity of what a team is able to deliver in points, and you take what the sum of those teams is able to deliver, you will arrive at an aggregate chief PO level velocity that can be telling of yesterday's weather. The key thing here is not to compare the teams. If we compare the velocity between the teams and pit them against each other as a form of improving their performance, now we're weaponizing those points, and that's what we traditionally hear, that the team's velocity is for their purposes. But when it comes to being able to understand the overall velocity of the organization, it is okay to aggregate those points so that we understand what is the velocity for a really big epic up here. Okay? So let's talk about a quick use case that I was a part of at a large enterprise. Before we do that, I wanted to check on the audio and how we're doing with the microphone. Are we okay?
It's a little elusive. It's kind of choppy for a bit, but in the past couple of minutes, it's been fine.
And it says now it's better? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. We'll try to keep monitoring that. If it becomes a problem, we'll go to an alternative. Just want to make sure. And this might be a good time as well for us to go to the next poll question. Lisa?
Perfect.
Thank you. So when we talk about the chief product owner, what is the responsibility of the chief product owner? And the output of the product owner's organization is it a strategic vision? Is it a product backlog prioritization? Is it backlog decomposition, or is it all of the above? Now, in this case, I didn't give you the answer 100% directly because I trust you that you are now able to put these dots together considering how much we covered. We have faith, Elizabeth, right?
We do, definitely. All right. It looks like the votes have kind of slowed down.
Oh, maybe because
So,
these are harder?
could be. Here's
I'm an
something.
optimist.
Yep. All right. So I will end the poll now and share the results with everyone.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Alyssa. So the responsibility of the chief product owner, the resounding answer to that was to optimize value delivery by the development team. That is correct, right? The job of removing impediment falls on the how side of our framework, that is the Scrum Master Circle. And to run the project management office well in Agile, we in the case of how we're scaling it and it being a linearly scalable architecture, there is no project management office in the traditional sense. Okay. What are the outputs of the product owner's organization? All of the above. The product owner is responsible as an organization for the strategic vision of the product, for the backlog prioritization itself through the product backlog items, and for the backlog decomposition itself. Okay, thank you. Great job. So let's talk about this use case and how we were able to scale across a large enterprise. The customer in this case was a technical service a client, very large with about 74,000 employees. And they were located in about 96 different countries. For purposes of this use case, the focus were 7 Scrum teams with about 80 different members working in distributed teams with 2 separate solutions, working in 7 different tools in order to provide those solutions, right? The objective was to create a single portal that unified all of that into a nice, piffy, modern architecture, okay? And we started out with an organization that was highly distributed and the roles were all over the place. We had different, the 2 services, the 2 primary services were organized by teams that essentially provided a different structure that were not consistent with different teams. So as you can see here, team 1A had a stakeholder in California, had a developer in North Carolina, had a PO in Virginia, and then there were the developers here. What sticks out here? There was no Scrum Master, right? In some cases, team 1B and 1C went straight into development, no PO, no stakeholders, so very linear direction between what was needed and what was developed. And you can see a similar pattern throughout, right? Where there were presence in Bangalore and Chennai, India, 2 different cities apart from each other, and throughout the US, right? And here's the PO, essentially individuals being spread out throughout the US trying to work together, right? And the pros of that were that because there wasn't a product owner in some cases, the team had significant high autonomy to decide what to work on. And that did have an advantage. They were able to turn around features very quickly as they came in, right? Well, because they grabbed them immediately as they came in and worked on them. But the problems were many. The cons with that approach was that the teams essentially didn't necessarily have clear priorities on what to work on first, right? They had competing solutions and competing tools. There was no strategic direction for the product. They had incompatibilities between the different products. They often worked on the same thing in different teams, right? And the problems were on, and they showed up in our key metrics. The velocity that the team had was very low. We had an average velocity of about 15 points per sprint. The months that it took to develop a single feature was as high as 6 months. And we had a 9% defect rate, so a lot of rework. The product backlog was significantly long because they just threw everything in there, right? And grabbed the first thing that was on top, not necessarily being the most important thing. So it created a lot of dissatisfied customers. So we started working through the problem, and the first thing we did was we tried to unify the request going through a chief product owner. So created this chief product owner role that was in Florida here, and we had a few POs that worked through the chief product owner, and the rest of the stakeholders went directly to the product owner. And then we had the folks in mostly development being in India, where we had a Scrum Master and a manager working with the different teams over here. And in Chennai, there was some legacy knowledge that we kept in order to maintain the product for continuous maintenance. So this structure brought some better results. We had a higher velocity. We were able to double our velocity for service 1. Remember that we had 2 services. For service 1, we had a higher number of velocity. We delivered iteratively. We started delivering every 2 weeks, and we had a lower defect count. The cons were that that solution was still working in silo. It was not collaborating with service 2. And in service 2, we had a peculiar problem. The architectural excellence was through the roof. The team focused on delivering technical excellence, but forgot about delivering customer value. So the velocity of what really was meant to be delivered, what the actual product backlog items were, was actually dropping. It went down to 0. And the high rate of defects was significantly higher because they were working on items that were complex in nature by the technical excellence that they were trying to achieve.
Hey, Ernesto, I hate to interrupt, but the last part, at least for me, was pretty choppy, and it kind of went in and out.
Oh, is that right? Okay, let me try something here, and we're going to fix this once and for all. And I'm going to go to my microphone and change microphones. Maybe that'll do.
Awesome.
Are we back?
We are back.
We
I
are
can
back.
hear you.
Sorry about that. Hopefully this is better. Okay. All right.
We got a couple of comments. We can hear you.
Excellent. All right.
Good.
Together, we were able to troubleshoot the problem. Hopefully we got it right.
Perfect.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Alyssa. So as far as the final step that we took, we had an interim step where we pivoted based on what we observed. We began the consolidation process, so we completed the consolidation process by having the chief product owner sit in Florida and minimize the number of stakeholders representatives so that there would be a primary stakeholder. And it went through the chief product owner as a requirement that then fed into the teams in Bangalore. There were several development teams of the right size. We probably could have made a smaller team out of these 10 folks here, but for the next iteration of this evolution, there were 2 teams. We had a Scrum, we had a scaled daily Scrum where the teams met daily to coordinate after their daily Scrum. And we had a Scrum Master sitting in with the teams and a PO to work with these teams locally. The same thing happened in this Scrum of Scrum, which is a network of teams working together. And they came together through a Scrum of Scrum of Scrums. This all happened within a day. The key element here, what made this work well, was that the product owner was sitting alongside with the development teams. And it provided that access to instant answers that brought the team and I know that many of you were not seeing the presentation. I apologize for that. It provided the necessary answers that the teams needed in real time. I'm going to go through it one more time because some of you were not seeing the share. We had a stakeholder representative, the stakeholders for Service 1 here that worked with the chief product owner who is sitting in Florida as a consolidated effort of the product owner US coordination that went through a single individual here being the chief product owner. And then we had the local POs working through the local product owners and the chief product owners here working together. The M is a manager that is now sitting, facilitating for both Scrum of Scrums. This allowed for more coordination between the two teams so that no one team would work in silo. By having the Scrum of Scrum here, these teams were able to work together. By having a Scrum of Scrum here, these teams for Service 2 were able to work together. And by having a Scrum of Scrums, the two SOSs were able to work together. Okay. In this case, the M is for a manager. Ideally, in the future, and we're going to cover that in a second, I'm following along with some of the items in the chat. Manager would have been a Scrum Master as part of the Scrum Master circle that is focusing on coordinating the how. Okay, so this is not a complete implementation. And the key element here is that because we had the stakeholders in California, they were able to work in close to real time with the chief product owner in Florida. And that allowed for a hub that allowed the chief product owner to coordinate on a daily basis with the local product owner in India. So it was no accident that the chief product owner was sitting in Florida because it was the eastmost location in order to have the most time zone availability between India and Florida, right? When we did that, we began to see some significant results. Before, if you remember, we have 15 points on average per team. We started exhibiting an average of about 45 points. We had a 6-month lead time. It went down to about 1 month worth on lead time. That is the delivery time for the features. We had 9% defect rate, and that went down to 3%. And the number of product backlog items, because of the focus on refining the product backlog, was significantly reduced to about 90 product backlog items. That's a major jump, right? That's not to say that all the items in that backlog were completed, but that the refinement allowed for some of those items to be deemed not applicable anymore. And now the team can focus on the items that were applicable. They provided additional focus for the team. So this was some of the results as I summarized them, right? And looking at the future, I mentioned that this was not a completed implementation. If we take the Scrum of Scrum and we added a chief product owner in that layer, we would have had further facilitation. We would have established an executive action team earlier in order to bring the benefits of these SOSs to other SOSs. And we would have placed a Scrum Master in the SOSOS as a representative to be able to facilitate the linear escalation or the linear scaling, which I see that some of you are asking as far as who facilitated. In this case, in this implementation, the manager facilitated the SOSOS, and that is not the ideal scenario. We want that to be a Scrum Master representative that is focused on the Scrum Master cycle. So there were more to this implementation that needs to take place in the future, but as far as the stages go and the benefit that we got, by simply consolidating the product owner role and allowing those product owners to work locally with those individuals, we had a tremendous advantage. And the hop in the time zones, so that there would be as much cross time zone work between the two product owners, being the chief product owner and the local product owner, was significant. Okay. Do we have any questions, Lisa?
We do, yes. And I wanted to reiterate, I see a couple in the chat, but if you have any questions that you want to be answered during the Q&A session, which will kick off now, just make sure you're putting those in the Q&A panel so that I can kind of sort and mark them. But one that we had from an enthusiastic attendee was looking for an example of a value stream and downstream epics.
That's a very good question. Purposefully, it wasn't included in here because the value stream itself is a significant method of how do you apply the resolution. Keep in mind that it is different for each organization. The level of resolution that you apply at each stage varies depending on how large that might be, right? So perhaps you're starting out with a need to apply artificial intelligence to a project, right? And your decomposition to that is maybe you want to have some natural language processing be added as part of your capability in order to be able to do that. So your next level of that might be natural language processing, right? And then your third level, or at the team level now, you might need to support some specific types of functionality in order for that to happen, perhaps parsing the data. So maybe a data parser is your team level execution, right? All of together, bringing it to the level where you're still accomplishing the bigger item and other teams are working on other aspects of that larger epic, which is artificial intelligence enablement, right? Hopefully that might ring a bell to some. Right?
Awesome. Perfect. We have another one that could be, tied to culture or the happiness of a team, but my chief product owner says that he can't meet once a week or once per sprint. How do I convince him that as the chief product owner, he needs to be more than just a manager?
That's a great question. By showing them the data, it's one start, right? Quick responses to answers and availability through a decisive product owner is pivotal to the success of a project. It's not negotiable. If you want to achieve double productivity, that is one of the elements that you absolutely must have. The second part is that the product backlog refinement is one of the main responsibilities of the product owner. And it is intentionally not an official event in Scrum because it is expected to be an ongoing activity. It is something that is worked on a regular basis by the product owner because that's how important it is. Think about how expensive it is for the team to build the wrong thing. The risk is too high. You need someone that is constantly on top of prioritizing that they build the right thing and that they're available to answer questions for that thing to be built. Okay.
That's great. Awesome. We have one more. And I think that this is something, at least in the last couple of webinars, that I have seen come up, and I would love to hear your answer to it. So you mentioned at the beginning of the slides that there is one backlog at the enterprise level. And then a little bit later in the presentation, you showed that the backlog is then further broken down into a backlog for the CPO and then for the team POs. Does that mean that there's not one enterprise backlog, unless what you meant was the enterprise backlog is really the epic backlog? There's a lot of backlogs in that, but.
Yeah, and that's a great question, because the terminology tends to get mixed. Different folks use different terms also, and that confuses the topic a little. I think the important part is to recognize that there is a central source of truth for the highest level of requirements. And we will call that the very big epic. You could call it anything you want, but it is a single product backlog that has the prioritization necessary and the right level of description for the next level of product owners to take that and say, this is mine, this is yours. Let's decompose those items into something that can now be executed by the team. And that product owner at the bottom is able to take those larger epics and convert them into a term that we're more familiar with, let's say user stories, that can be executed within a single sprint. So it is a single backlog. How you tag that, it has different permeations in different organizations. If you're using something like Jira, you might use some tagging. If you're using a physical board, you might simply use different color schemes. That all depends, as long as you're able to trace that into a single source of truth.
Yep, awesome. All right. How would you implement Scrum at scale to a company that has no appetite to dismantling the PMO?
I love the passive aggression question. So first, a question that is normally asked right before that is, when is it the right time to scale? Right? And let's all recognize that if we are trying to coordinate more than one team, by definition, we are trying to scale. So there are different levels of scaling, but in the end, anything more than one team needs some coordination, and that is scaling. Scrum at scale takes the very nature of how we're working together as a team, and we amplify that across the organization. If we have organizations that are used to working in a traditional format and are not necessarily open to changing that, there's going to be a conflict. There's going to be a conflict. We have a need to be able to align how the execution is happening and what we're building with the expectations of the larger organization. Now, there are ways for us to face that in different ways, and that gets into a whole transformation strategy. But overall, that's the short answer. There's just a conflict if there is no willingness for the organization to change. A linear architecture or a linear scaling architecture is not something that can be done by one team. It has to be done by agreeing across the different teams that this is how we're going to work together. Okay.
Awesome. All right. And that honestly is about all of the questions that we got specific to the presentation. There's a few that I will answer just about where things are on the website and additional resources, but I also want to respect our time box. It looks like we're about 7 minutes past, which is, I apologize about that.
Oh, is that right?
Didn't mention that, yes.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll give it back to you, Ernesto, to kind of close us out.
Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you for that. And I'm sorry, we blew the time box there. So let's quickly get a quick feel, a heat map in terms of your value for what we heard here today. If you can just go to mentimeter.com right on your PC, and you can type in code 994802, and you have room for 3 words, 3 single words that describes your experience here in this webinar today. We would love to hear from you. It's a quick way for us to have a retrospective. You could also just use the QR code here and scan it with your mobile phone and type it in. Yeah. And for purposes of having a little fun, I'm going to switch over and we're going to see that in real time, right? Where are we? Oh, you know, I closed that in order to address the problem. But I can open that real quick as you vote. Please don't let that stop you.
Yes, definitely. And also, while Ernesto is pulling that up, I want to mention that, yes, today's webinar was recorded. All of the slides and the recording of the presentation will be on the website and on the YouTube channel by the end of the day today. And there will be a follow-up email with some additional resources. I see someone asked for a link to the virtual coaching sessions. I'll include that as well. Yeah.
Okay, so we got some answers that are loading now, and we're going to see that in real time. And we have a word map, informative, interesting, learning, great, superficial. Yeah, we do are limited by time, unfortunately, in these sessions. So we try to give you as much as we can. There are more sessions diving into specific topics that will be coming up as well throughout the next weeks and months. So we hope you continue to join us. Excellent.
Awesome.
Great feedback. Thank you. These will be open for today, so feel free to continue to use up your 3 entries. Thank you, Alyssa, for great facilitation, and thank you, everyone, for attending.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Ernesto, for joining us again, and thank you all to attendees. And we will see you guys in the next webinar presentation.